Hi, welcome to the Baby Sleep Magic podcast. My name is Chantal, and today's episode I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to get your baby to sleep through the night. So look, my first tip is to ensure that you have the right room environment. So look, I'm talking babies here between 0 and 2 years of age, because in between that age, babies are not afraid of the dark. So the darker you can get that room, the better. You don't need any night lights, close the door, darken the windows however you can. You don't need to go over the top and literally make sure there's not a glimmer of light with gaffer tape. Honestly, you don't need to go to that extreme. But, having some dark blinds or some blockout blinds is ideal. Because like I said, babies are not afraid of the dark. So the darker you can get that room, the more success you're going to get. And to be honest, I'm not a huge advocate of having a dark room forever. That's not what I'm condoning here. While you're trying to get your little one to fall asleep relatively fuss-free and stay asleep and not experience early rising, because what we're talking about right now is getting them to sleep through the night, you need a dark room, and that's going to work obviously to your advantage. So once your little one is good at sleeping, has had plenty of practice at sleeping, having a dark room at that point isn't an absolute necessity. You don't need to have it indefinitely. So don't feel like, oh, I don't want to implement a dark room because I don't want it forever. No, that's not what I'm saying. Just use it when you need it, which is trying to get your little one, try and get the best out of your little one, and having a dark room will help. Another thing that will really help when it comes to room environment is white noise. Now, babies are used to a very loud environment in the womb. They're used to 90 decibels. So having white noise for them when they're sleeping is actually quite soothing. They like it. They thrive off it. It's proven that it helps with their sleep. So what you want to make sure is that white noise is turned on before you ideally go into the room, and then it's on for the whole duration of the night. That's really important. You don't want to have the white noise on when they're falling asleep and then it turns off after 25 or 45 minutes, because then when Bub wakes, the room environment isn't the same. The white noise is obviously not on. So you want to have a machine that's capable of staying on all night. Ideally, you want to have something that's plug-in, because anything with batteries is, you're going to go through a million batteries. Make sure you've got something that can plug in, and also make sure the white noise is loud enough. That's another big tip that I've got, because if it's not loud enough, it's no point having it in there. As an example would be, same volume as the shower. So when you're in the shower, you think that you hear the door go or someone in the background, you can't really hear it. It drowns it out. And that's kind of how loud you want that white noise to be. So anything, particularly in Australia, the Australian standards, they sell anything with white noise anywhere between 60 to 70, 75 decibels. And that's completely safe and fine, because remember, when Bubs were in the womb, they were used to 90 decibels 24/7, and it was obviously completely fine. Dark room and white noise is absolutely key to the room environment. Also ensure your baby is warm enough. So even in summer, you want to dress your baby for the coldest part of the night, which is usually between, 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. That's when, even as adults, we would at that point look for our doona or snuggle up a bit, because it's quite chilly at that time of the morning, even in summer. So you want to ensure your baby is wearing the right either layers or the right Tog sleeping bag, because come 3, 4 in the morning, what you don't want Bub to do is wake up and then be ready to start their day because they're not so much cold. You go in and you touch them, they won't really be cold, but they're certainly not going to be warm enough to roll over and go back to sleep. And especially if they've already slept through 8, 10 hours already, they're going to want to party, basically. So, and you want to avoid that. So yeah, dressing them appropriately is key. And even in summer, I usually suggest dressing them for the coldest part of the night, whether it's a onesie and a sleeping bag or shorts and t-shirt and a sleeping bag, and having either the aircon on or a fan on quite full on, so when they are going to sleep, they're obviously not hot and sweaty and all clammy. You don't want that. You want them to fall asleep ideally in a cool environment. But then later, either when you go to sleep or they've gotten into their deepest sleep, which can take not that long, obviously, but once they're in a deep sleep, you can then turn the fan down or reduce the air conditioning or whatever you might need to do, or even turn it off depending on the time and things like that. So that's usually what I suggest in summer, because like I said, you want your bub to go to bed not hot and clammy. You want them to be cool and comfortable, but then come 3 a.m. you want them to be snug and warm. So there is a bit of a fine line and a bit of trial and error about that. Another big key tip to remember is daytime naps, making sure that you're sticking to your baby's appropriate wake window. What you don't want to do is follow times and strict regimes, because babies and yourself, you're not a robot, your baby's not a robot. You don't want to have to wake your baby up to then follow a strict regime or routine. You don't want that. I'm a huge advocate of wake windows, and depending on the age of your baby. So, I've got all the information that you need on wake windows and appropriate wake windows and sleep guides inside the Baby Sleep Magic app if you're unsure of what your baby's wake window is. But that's my biggest tip there, because you don't want your baby becoming overtired, because an overtired baby can lead to frequent night wakings and early rising. So making sure your baby has the appropriate daytime naps is absolute key to ensuring you get a successful night ahead. Now, another one is, particularly for during the day, is to ensure your baby gets the appropriate calories through the day. This is the absolute key to success here, because no matter what you do everywhere else, if your room environment's good and Bub's dressed appropriately and the day naps have all fallen into place, if your baby hasn't fed well enough through the day, then they're going to wake up frequently at night to make up for it. Now, obviously for babies, young babies, it's still very normal for them to wait for feeding overnight. That's absolutely fine, and that's not the problem. That's not what I'm saying. It's when they wake up frequently is the problem. So if they're waking up every 2 to 3 hours through the night, that's where I can see that as a bit of a red flag and a problem, especially if they're feeding. Babies, even newborns, can go 4 hours in between night feeds, as long as they're on track with their weight gain and there's no medical history or anything like that. Most babies are capable of going at least 4 hours in between feeds overnight. And that's kind of what you want to aim for. The only way you're going to be able to achieve that is to ensure that they're feeding well through the day. Now that goes for young babies that aren't on solids, and then obviously for bubbers over the age of 6 months that are on solids. Calories is key to success. So yeah, I've got a lot more information on feeding, calories, controlling calories. That's the thing, babies control their own calories, and toddlers. So the more you give them through the day, the less they're going to want to need overnight. And like I said, if you want more information on food and calories, I've got separate podcasts purely on that one topic. I've got a lot of info on my social media handles, videos on that, but also inside the Baby Sleep Magic app, where we've worked with a dietitian on food guides that can help guide you on what your baby needs given their age. Then most importantly, after all this, is self-settling. So self-settling, once your baby can self-settle, then the chances of you getting a full night's sleep is going to become very, very high. Now that doesn't mean to say if your baby can't self-soothe, you're not going to get a full night. I'm not saying that either, because in some cases, some babies do rely on feeding to sleep, rocking to sleep, being cuddled to sleep, and they can and are capable of sleeping through the night, as long as all those other things are in place. And what you might find, you get to the end, you might try that for a week or 3 and realize you're still not getting anywhere, and then you might need to implement some type of self-settling or self-sleep training depending on the age of your baby. But self-settling is, important component, and it does increase your chances of an absolute successful night when it comes to sleeping all night. But again, it's not impossible to get your baby to sleep through the night without that. My last tip is to ensure that with that last bedtime feed, ensure that you offer that last feed early enough before Bub hits the wall. And what I mean by this is usually includes, the bath and getting changed and then the last milk feed of the night. Because as an example, if your baby's ready to go to bed at 7 p.m. and you have the bath at 6:30, and then from 6:30 you go into the room and you do nappy and pajamas, and then you pop them either on the breast or give them the bottle at 10 to 7. Now, 10 to 7, to be honest, isn't a huge amount of time for your baby to have their last feed, because come in 7-8 minutes time, your baby's going to get so tired that they're going to probably fall asleep either on the breast or bottle, and then they haven't had that full feed for the last opportunity of the night. And that is the key to success with the last feed of the night, because this is your baby's last opportunity to fill up before the night ahead. And babies over the age of 7 to 9 weeks of age, they know the difference between day and night. So babies want that big feed at the end of the night to last them as long as possible. And if they don't get the opportunity to do that properly, then the chances of them waking prematurely to kind of catch up on what they missed out on is very, very high. And that's what you want to try and avoid. So making sure you allow a good 20 minutes for that last feed is the absolute key to success here when it comes to getting the best out of them, when it comes to the length of sleep that they're capable of doing. So like I said, I would allow a good 20 minutes, go in the room. At this point, you may want to have the light on, even the door open, it doesn't really matter, or a lamp on. You don't really want it to be in a pitch black room when you're offering that last feed because it's easier for them to drift off. So keep them engaged in the feed. Have a lamp on, maybe not even have them completely dressed. You may even just want to have them in a nappy and a singlet to begin with and tickle their feet and, talk to them well, so they're quite engaged with that feed. And at the end of the day, when they finish that feed, you want them to be able to go in the cot awake. And that is where the self-settling comes into it. Look, I hope these tips help. It just gives you a bit of an overview and gives you some tips on, how to get your baby to potentially sleep through the night. Most babies should be capable of sleeping through the night from around about 6 months plus. All depends on, obviously, their daytime calories, their self-settling skills, their development in terms of growth. But ultimately, my number one tip for parents out there is just to have realistic expectations. Every single baby's different. Every single lifestyle's different. Every single environment's different. And it's practice. Practice makes perfect. So when you get your baby finally sleeping through the night, it comes down to practice and consistency. And for the first 2 years, your baby's going to go through a bit of a wild ride when it comes to teething, regression, sickness, and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely going to be moments amongst that time where they're not going to sleep through the night. And you're going to have to obviously do what you got to do to get them over the line. And whether that's just cuddling them because they're not well, or offering extra feeds because they didn't feed well that day, whatever it may be. But yeah, like I said, the first 2 years is pretty wild. But once your baby is capable of self-soothing and sleeping is a skill for life. That's something they will never ever forget. And then when things go off track, like I said, with sickness and teething and regressions, everything is fixable. You can always get back on track. You don't ever need to retrain as such. You just need to get back on track. I hope these tips help. If you do find this information helpful, please feel free to share it with another mum or a friend. And I'll see you in the next podcast.